And we're on. This is a special edition of 3 Yards Per Carry.
It's a great day. It's a great day.
All right, hold on.
We're just dancing on graves here.
I'm sorry. Look, there's a human element to it. Somebody would just lose their job, and they just lost their dad as well. So I do feel bad, but
well, it's the start of something, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, this is an emergency pod. You guys know what time it is. You know all our sponsors. We're just going to talk about the news of the day, and we're going to get into the most important thing that has happened so far, and that is we're going to talk about that tripping penalty yesterday. Let's do 1 minute on that tripping penalty, and I'm going to give my take on it. Okay? Yeah, it was a terrible call. You know what was worse than that tripping penalty call? And of course, it wipes out 36 yards. The ball gets down to the 5-yard line. Maybe the game goes different. You never know. It's a terrible call. You know what, in my opinion, was the worst part of that? Was Eric Stutesville losing his freaking mind on Ollie Gordon, and then Ollie Gordon giving it back to him. He deserved it. Like, that's a terrible look. Look up to the goddamn screen, Eric.
Especially when McDaniel is like doing the sort of, when McDaniel's doing the kind of, no, it wasn't a penalty, it wasn't a penalty, it wasn't a penalty. You could tell that, it was obvious that it wasn't a penalty. The optics on that was so bad for Stutesville. I just don't know why. I mean, maybe he was sat. Why would he be sat on the sideline not looking at what happened? But I think Stevie Wonder picked up that it wasn't a tripping penalty. So Christ knows why he couldn't.
Well, the NFL has essentially explained that call, and they said that it was an attempt to trip. I don't know where in the rule book it's an attempt to trip is a penalty. Yeah. Like, he didn't touch him.
I mean, clearly slips.
Well, he cut. I mean, it basically functioned like a cut block, right? I mean, is that not, cut blocks are not allowed in space like that, or?
No, they're allowed. They're allowed, especially on the outside. You're not supposed to cut inside of the tackles. You can't cut inside of the tackles. It's outside of the tackle.
I assumed that when it was happening, because I didn't see it in real time. I assumed, he must have just, as he rolled over, he must have lifted his leg up and tripped him as a sort of natural reaction to what you would do.
Yeah,
and he just doesn't. He loses.
He didn't even do that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing he could do. And if the NFL says that is the law, then the law is ridiculous.
Yeah. No, the NFL says an attempt to trip.
But
is the same as a trip.
But miss calls happen, all the time in every game. What ended up happening afterward does not happen in every game, and to every team. Every team has, that was that wasn't real, stuff like that. What happened afterward is very uniquely characteristic of this particular Miami Dolphins team this year, with the way that Eric Stutesville blew up and that Ollie Gordon blew up back at him, and that's just testament to where this team is.
Yeah. No, and then Mike McDaniel absolutely losing his shit with Larry Borum. I thought that was hilarious. Like, it took 9 weeks.
Well, because it's he does it almost every week. Like, Larry Borum ends up doing exactly what he did there.
And why can't he do it? Why can't he do it on 1st and 10 from the 45? You know what I mean? No, he picks the worst possible times every single time. And I like a lot of the lip readers are out there, and some are saying he's saying things that he did not say. But one thing he does say clearly is Mike McDaniel, when he's screaming, "That's a touchdown." I guess the call was good on the play. That's a touchdown. So yeah. Anyway,
I wonder what the touchdown. I saw the Amazon pregame show, but when Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tua were in the car and they picked out a play that was definitely going to be a touchdown, I wonder what that play was. I thought it was the Waddle catch with the slip over by Ollie Gordon, but yeah.
Anyway, enough about the game. We're going to talk a little bit about that game on Monday, and then we're going to look big picture. But the news of the day is, yes, Chris Grier and the Miami Dolphins have mutually agreed to part ways. Should I read because I have it here in my, I don't know if you guys get it in your email. I get it in my email. and I'll read it. So
Read
so
it off.
people
Read it off. It's a
Read it to
day
music.
for reading it off. Yeah, read it to music. That's right.
All right, hold on. That's not going to be necessary. I could find music here. Let me get some music. What do you guys want to listen to?
Something orchestral.
Yes.
Something. How
The
about
last-
something?
Grand.
How about
last
something? How about
thing.
something sexy?
Something hopeful.
No,
Jesus,
that's
that is definitely not the vibe.
that's not right. That's not the vibe.
What the
It's got to be something.
A little techno.
No, it's got to be orchestral. Piano.
No. It's something hopeful and orchestral.
Yeah, the Lark Ascending.
Let me see.
And that on Spotify. That's not it.
What is all this? What are you bringing
The
out?
musical taste is terrible.
No, all of this is terrible. Like, man, we need better
Like,
music in here.
First you bring out straight up like making love music, and then
Yeah.
you
All right, let me see. How about this? If not, no, that doesn't work either. What is this? What the hell is this? Now we need better.
Anything from Star Wars. I don't know.
There's a file called Terry Rozier, and you know what it sounds like?
I know what it's going to be.
It's just a bunch of those. I was just going to say it's a bunch of those like sound effects that you see in old time movies when somebody's banana peel. Like,
yeah, we need better music, but I don't have time to upload it. Let me see if there's more in the.
Clearly, we're very prepared for this.
Yeah, I gotta find better music. We do have this.
All right, good enough.
Do we have like a crowd?
Well, that's what we need.
What do we need?
The main theme from Interstellar. You know, the one where
where
McConaughey's crying because he sees his kids and they're much older, and you have to realize.
I actually saw the Hans Zimmer experience like live.
Wow.
Yeah, with like full orchestra and light show. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable.
That is
one of the best shows I've ever been to.
I bet.
But anyway, let me read this thing. By the way, if any of you are like me, I'm very tidy with my email. Like, I delete emails. I keep it manicured. I'm saving this one. I think the oldest email I have maybe is a year old. Maybe.
I think I have emails from like 1999.
Nice. Did you have an AOL account, Chris?
No, I had a Yahoo account.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had a Yahoo and I had an AOL.
Back here.
Yeah. All right, let me read this. Miami Gardens, Florida. And the headline says Miami Dolphins and Chris Grier mutually part ways for immediate release on October the 31st, 2025.
I like the for immediate release part.
Yes. Why not a slow release like a drug? Statement from chairman of the board and managing general partner Stephen M. Ross. And all of this is quoted. This morning, I made the decision, along with General Manager Chris Grier, to mutually part ways. I have incredible respect for Chris and his family, and I want to thank him for his many contributions to the Miami Dolphins over the past 26 years. As I assessed the state of the team and in my discussions with Chris, it became clear to both of us that change could not wait. We must improve in 2025, 2026, and beyond. And it needs to start right now. Champ Kelly will serve as interim general manager effective immediately, and we will begin our search process for a new general manager. I want to thank Champ for stepping up and his commitment to the Dolphins' success this season. There is a lot of football left to play, and we all need to fight even harder. I have always been and remain committed to building a winning team that consistently competes for championships. I am incredibly proud of our leadership as an NFL organization and our continued commitment to the community, but our performance on the field and our team building process have not been good enough. There are no excuses. I want to thank the fans for their continued support and passion for this team. You deserve a championship caliber team and can be proud of that. You can be proud of. There's much work ahead to return the Dolphins to sustained success, and that work begins now. Finishing the season strong, evaluating all areas of our football operation, and moving forward with a clear vision for the future. What? First of all, what did you make of the statement? And then we're going to get into Chris Grier and where he failed the many times. Simon, the statement. What do you think?
I mean, it's 3 years too late. Look, it's glad that they're taking. I think. Look, we all know. We all said. We've all been saying. It would be coming at some point, and really, I do think that it's been done the right way around, and I think it's important to say as well that Adam Schefter, after dropping the Grier bomb, then came out and said Mike McDaniel will not lose his job this season at the earliest, and may stick around longer, which I think is important, and I think they've done it the right way. For all the problems that there were on the field last night, I think that we went back to our Discord and we were talking about, look, what are the building blocks for this team? What would you build around, right? 28, the running back, 17, Waddle, Malik Washington, you keep around. Paul,
52 and 55 are
yeah, but is that a building block?
Yeah, I mean,
you keep just. There's a difference between guys that you keep around.
Yeah, but kind
versus,
of key, let's say key sort of tenants. 20, Achan, a scat back running back is probably number one on your offensive list. 17 Waddle, 52 the left tackle, 55 Brewer. That's probably it, because we know about the Tua situation, which kind of sits right. Defensively. 90, but only because you just spent a first round pick with him. 44, right. Those,
Yeah, same.
20.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm struggling after that.
I think 11. I think 11. 11. Yeah, he got beat by Zay Flowers, but come on, it's Zay Flowers. He played with his hair on fire last night.
That's a substantial building block.
But is that just a guy, or is that a substantial building block? And also, you're not going to trust him in that situation pretty much ever, because he's too slow-footed. Yeah. Like, so I mean, there's a big limitation involved in him at safety, and you really have to. There's a difference between guys that you build around and guys that you have to build around because you have to account for their weaknesses. And Dante Trader right now, and possibly forever, because he's just not a fast player. You're going to have to build around him with knowledge of his weaknesses. Like, you're going to have to, he's there, and so therefore we need this because he can't do it. That kind of thing. As opposed to some of the other players, it's like you're building around what they can do. And I think that there's a difference there.
Yeah, and I would say 15, but it's got, like I've said this before, it's going to take a good general manager to figure out how you keep him on a wage that is palpable for all involved.
What accounts for his injury history, and that's sort of because he's the kind of guy that'll lull you to sleep with some health and really excellent play. And then bam, it just hits you. But there's some guys out there, there's some superstars out there that are like that. So you can afford some of those guys. You can't afford a lot of those guys.
Yeah, and my God, and I get it, people. Last night, another consequential play. Jalen Phillips has both hands around, and Lamar Jackson's really strong, but come on. Jalen Phillips is stronger, and Justin Herbert is strong, but Jalen Phillips is stronger. Bring these people down, Jalen. Like, you keep getting right to the point where you're going to make an impactful play, and then the play just doesn't get made. But moving on to, that was just a game, and we'll talk about that game on Monday and who is actually worth keeping and how they go forward. But Chris Grier's tenure, the best way I could describe it as where he failed was he stuck to a philosophy that there was a market inefficiency in the NFL where if a player has an injury history, and this is the truth, if a player has an injury history, most general managers, and they probably should, look at those players differently, and he was going to exploit that to great benefit, right? Like, we're gonna go in the bargain bin for these people that other teams won't touch, but have good tape, and we're gonna get them on the cheap, and we're gonna get a lot of them, and therefore that's gonna make our roster really, really good. Problem is, when you do that over and over and over again, and you catch just a little whiff of bad luck, all of them can be injured, and you could set yourself up for a disaster season just like you are experiencing right now. And no better example than what happened on the right side of the offensive line. You spend money on a right tackle, you spend money on a right guard, you extend the right tackle, you buy the right guard for $8 million APY. You're spending $23 million. Those $23 million played what? 3 snaps and like 11 snaps this season?
Yeah.
The
Dolphins are second in the league in contract APY, sitting on reserve list.
Yeah. You do not win games in the NFL with all your money on IR or on the bench. There's 2 things. You buy a player, you pay a player, and he's not good enough, and now he's on the bench. That's a general manager mistake. You buy a player, you pay a player, he gets injured, he goes on IR. That's another general manager mistake. Chris Grier made it a habit. Even when the team was fun and competitive and pretty damn good in 2023, even then, what happened that season? 3 offensive linemen go down, every single edge rusher goes down, and everything could be traced right back to all the moves and all the decisions that they made leading up to that. So, in my opinion, that's where he failed consistently, and it finally came to a head in a disaster season, in a perfect microcosm of his entire tenure here, and where he made the mistake, which was trying to stick to that philosophy, try to exploit it, that market inefficiency, and guess what? It bit him in the ass, and not only did it bite him in the ass big time this season, it bit him in the ass consistently his entire tenure here. Your thoughts, Simon, on what did Chris Grier in?
I mean, where did it go wrong? You don't get the quarterback right. You have a rebuild that summarily fails. You tank and it summarily fails. You make 3 first-round picks, all of whom, in the grand scheme of things, aren't good enough. One of them's not on the team anymore. One of them will probably get cut at the end of the season. One of them will probably get cut at the end of next season. And that's a damning indictment. You've paid the wrong people. You've paid people at the wrong time. The draft picks haven't been good enough. You then make stupid statements about clear problems on the team, such as the infamous, you worry about the offensive line way more than we do, and then laugh as if you're laughing at the face of the fans and the media and people who know how terrible it is. And literally watched it last night, and Tua can't even get a Hail Mary playoff against a 4-man rush because he gets sacked. The rookie left guard gets pushed back into the quarterback's lap near the goal. All of these things that just continually, perpetually happen. And also, look, the roster just isn't good enough. Like we literally just said it 10 minutes ago. We read out the numbers of the players that we actually thought were building blocks, of which there were seven building block players on a team of 53. How is that even?
If that.
How is that acceptable? You're tethered to a massive contract to a quarterback that you can't get out of unless you put the team into salary cap hell. And whilst I don't think the quarterback is the problem, he's also not the solution, or he's not he's not the biggest problem. He's also not the solution. And yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I think that the rebuild started with that blowout against Baltimore in 2019. And the rebuild finished defeat to Baltimore last night. And I think there's something quietly beautiful about that in a way, in that it squares the circle in many regards. That there's just a nice sort of symbiosis to that, I think, and everything that has happened. And you take away, the issues with Brian Flores, the Tom Brady stuff with the owner, all of those things, I mean, I'm not going to slander anybody, but did Chris Grier not know about any of the other issues that were going on, the Flores stuff, all of the things that were happening in the Dolphins ether? So it's just been a huge and composite failure. No playoff wins, 2 playoff appearances, both defeats, one of which we had to start our 3rd string quarterback, one of which we got smashed against Kansas City. Injuries, historically, players that we either trade for, that we sign. that we draft, that we pick up as free agents. I mean, look at the free agents that we picked up this year. James Daniels gets hurt on the third play. Ashton Davis, how many games has he missed? Melifonwu, all of these players that we bring in perpetually hurt and just not fixing. It's just not problem solving. Never problem solving. The issue with our best cornerback this season, Rasul Douglas, was picked up a week before the season started, and that's just not acceptable. It's not good enough. And
to be clear, I hate to interrupt you. And to be clear, they identified Rasul Douglas, which I guess it's a good mark on the scouting staff. They identified Rasul Douglas in March because we talked about it on our Discord. And right there, if you want to join our Discord, discord.gg/OnlyFins, you become a member there, all access for $4.99 a month. Sign up on a desktop, please. We talked about it on the Discord. They identified Rasul Douglas early on in March, and it took them to August to save a buck here, a buck there. Kyle Krabs pointed out clearly they cut 3 players in training camp that were here less than 4 days in back-to-back fashion. Remember the Ifedi and Kajust situation? That cost the team $1.5 million. Point.
You bring in a guy, you sign a guy who isn't good enough, who gets injured, and then you have to bring in another guy that everybody said you should have picked from the workout in the first place. It's like, what are we doing? And when, look, we are just fans. Like, we're just fans, and everybody that listens to this is just are just fans. But when you've got groups of knowledgeable fans and media people who just continue to say all the things that seem to be right, and they turn out to be right, but the decisions that your team makes are exactly the opposite and turn out to be wrong, that is not a good look. And every GM and every coach, it doesn't matter whether you're Andy Reid, whether you're Bill Belichick, Don Shula, whoever it is, everybody gets criticized. Everybody makes mistakes. Not everybody's been perfect. But when this is over, Chris, and over and over and over again, it just seems like it's just got to stop.
I think Chris Grier's problems, building from the bottom up, there's specific problems. You mentioned the first round picks have not worked out. I think there's a consistent problem with a Chris Grier front office in evaluating offensive linemen, Patrick Paul notwithstanding. I think that thank you, Chris Grier, for the parting gift on that one, but it's not enough. I think the offensive line in particular has been a position weakness that you can point to, go down big decisions to small, all the way ranked down, and you're just going to see a pattern of really poor decision making along the offensive line, poor evaluation. So that needs to be revamped, period, like within the front office. And if it's not just a Chris Grier thing, then then that's where you talk about cleaning house and things like that. So yes, there's his first round picks didn't work out. He has issues with evaluating offensive linemen and always has. That's a persistent thing. There's a sort of a penny wise, pound foolish aspect of the way that he does things. He pinches pennies in situations where that's an unwise thing to do, and then he throws around large amounts of money in situations where that was an unwise thing to do. There's also the fact that, as Alf you brought up, he thinks that there's a market inefficiency about injuries. I don't think it's just injuries. I think he's looking for market inefficiencies, period. But it's sort of it comes up and bites you. But if we're getting to a higher level of what's wrong with Chris Grier and his general managing of the Dolphins, it's a lack of intelligent design. This is when you're putting together a portfolio of assets like this, there needs to be an intelligent design about how all these assets work with one another and what functions they perform on a roster. There needs to be an element of risk management to know where your risks are and to have backup plans for those risks. I mean, this is all, it's not easy. There's nothing about this that is easy, but it is necessary. You have to do that. There's not enough intelligent design with him. And I would also say at a very high level, there are no core principles. There's no guiding star. There's nothing that he brings to the table as a general manager from one coach to the next coach to the next coach, because everything becomes about, well, okay, well, what do you want? And so remember, go back in time, because a number of years ago, it was sort of almost a meme with us, very inside baseball, but we were joking around about how young Chris Grier likes all his assets, the guys that he drafts, the guys that he signs and stuff like that, or the fact that, it's all about building with youth and building with the draft and stuff like that. We've flipped completely to being addicted to the heroin of free agency after that. Right. That's what the team is replacing 50% of their snaps every single. I brought this up or before the offseason even began. After an offseason in which we had to replace like 50% of the snaps, something like that, in one offseason, and we kind of got lucky with some of those acquisitions. Here we are having to do it again, and you're not always going to get that lucky, because free agency and acquiring other people's players is treacherous. So there's, without that sort of those guiding principles of how we do things. This is how we do things, and I'm not brooking any arguments about it, because this is the best way to go. I don't think he has that. I think that he's reacting in real time, just always. So there's not a lot of forethought. There's not a lot of planning. There's not a lot of guiding principles. And that leads you to kind of be all over the place and then get stuck into these situations that snowball. And he got stuck into a situation that snowballed. So, from the ground level, yeah, there are the things. The first round picks have not been great. The offensive line evaluations have never been great. We can talk about the decision to give Tua money and the fact that he's, penny wise, pound foolish with some of these contracts, to given the extensions to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey, and the amount of money that they're spending on Minkah Fitzpatrick this year to be a pretty good nickel. I think there's a lot of that, but you really go to the high level, and it is a lack of guiding principles. It is a lack of discipline. And it is a lack of forethought and intelligent design of a roster portfolio as a portfolio of assets. And it's unfortunate for him, but it should also be a really good learning experience for the Miami Dolphins ownership about what they should be looking for in the next guy, and the most unfortunate thing would be if here they are satisfying all of the fan bloodlust by firing Chris Grier midseason, even though that's not really a thing that happens very often. This is purely a bloodlust thing. There's nothing that's going to improve next week because your general manager has been replaced with the interim, right? It's not even like the head coach, right? So even though they've done this thing, if they don't learn anything from it, if they don't learn what the real problems were and what they have to look for in the next guy, then that would be the true tragedy.
Yeah. And I thought last night, and we're going to get into more things that I think don't get talked about enough, like him recommending Brian Flores and then launching into a complete civil war in year 3. So yeah, there's many things that got him fired.
And arguably something, not nearly as vicious has happened already, where, here he is with McDaniel. And I think that behind the scenes, McDaniel is killing based on the personnel, how am I supposed to coach this team? And I think that happened between Chris Grier and Vic Fangio. Fangio as an assistant coach.
Can I ask you a question, Chris? I mean, I know the answer to this, but for the listeners, because I suspect at home they'll be saying, yeah, but what about this question? And what does Chris think about this? And what does Al think about this? But if we're to believe, and why wouldn't we, that the McDaniel to a relationship is tethered to the rocks and about to hit those rocks, what do you think Mike McDaniel then is after in his next quarterback? What do you think he is looking for? What is the manifestation of a Mike McDaniel quarterback in 2026 to run what? If we're giving him the keys to, and Adam Schefter said he's going to be here until the end of the season at least. And it may be that, there's a GM that says, I can make this guy work. I can make this guy work. And all this stuff that the TV shows are saying that he's not a leader of men. They're not in the locker room. They don't know that. And despite all the ridiculousness last night, again, even in the defeat, it didn't look like the team weren't playing for him. They were just making dumb mistakes. And the dumb mistakes in part of the Mike McDaniel era, unfortunately. But it didn't look like a lack of effort. So with that in mind, what would you foresee Mike McDaniel going to Champ Kelly or to Alec Hallaby or to John Eric Sullivan or to Dawn Aponte, whoever it is, the next GM, and saying, this is what I want. I want X, Y, and Z. In your image, what do you think that would be?
As a quarterback, if we're talking about there first, I think that he's not going to look for a completely different type of quarterback. Go back to Snoop Huntley, and I think that there was some behind the scenes resistance between or some disagreement between Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel over Snoop Huntley. Whereas I don't think Mike McDaniel was necessarily excited to get someone like Tyler Huntley as the backup quarterback. I think that, look no further than who he drafted in Quinn Ewers. Look no further than who he drafted before, or who he stuck with, for as long as they did, with Skylar Thompson. What you're looking for is, he's crying poor mouth out there right now through intermediaries. He's crying poor mouth about Tua and his lack of physical abilities and his physical limitations, trying to build an offense around Tua's physical limitations. So you're looking for a version of Tua that has better physical characteristics. That's essentially what he's going to want, because he's still going to want an offense that's based on all this choreography, that's based on all this, great footwork, great anticipation with the throws, great, accuracy and timing. He's still going to want to do all that. He's still going to want all of that in a quarterback, but he's going to want that with a guy who can take a hit and who can get the ball and, hopefully can get the ball to areas of the field that maybe they don't currently get the ball to, and who can get himself out of a jam physically with athleticism. I think that's it. And it's sort of like, well, is that all? Because that's, you're talking about the perfect quarterback, but it is, I think he's going to still look for those traits that Tua has that helps the offense. Cause you know what? A lot of the time this offense does run pretty well. And I don't think people give enough credit for that sometimes, but they're going to look for that as a starting point, but they're going to want to see better physical ability. So like I use the example sometimes of Jalen Daniels of Kansas, because of the offense that they're running right now. It's that offense and his execution of it are very Miami-like in a lot of ways, just as prior Quinn Ewers was reputed in that offense under Sarkisian to be running things that are very compatible, right, with the Dolphins offense. But Jalen Daniels has a lot of other physical characteristics that are very, very attractive, able to damage a defense in different other ways. And so something like that, except Jalen Daniels is probably ultimately a bad example just because of the injury history and where we're trying to move away from that. But somebody like that. And so that's what I see them going. That's where I see them trying to look.
Yeah, I'm reading a book right now that's called, in fact, I have it right here that I'm reading it. It's called The Why is Everything. And it talks about the Shanahan coaching tree, and it has chapters on each of the coaches. And I know that Chris likes to call it the Shanahan cult. It's a cult. You read this book, and they have chapters on each of the coaches. they all sound the same. They all sound just like Mike Shanahan, the original. And Kyle is like the disciple. Kyle is like the one who's giving them he's giving them the sacrament. All right.
It's like the NFL's version of Scientology. It's
yes.
crazy.
And it's even the ones that we like. Like we love Sean McVay. Like we will take Sean McVay in a second. Okay. In fact, I would trade. Like if there, I would never. I've said this before. I would never ever trade draft picks for a head coach. I would for Sean McVay because I do think he's the best play caller, best head coach in football right now. But even Sean McVay talks about it, where he's had blow-ups with Matthew Stafford, a guy who's headed for the Hall of Fame, and that's why the book is titled "The Why Is Everything." And he's like, I want and this is Sean McVay speaking. I want my quarterback to ask me why, but then I'm going to tell him why. That's how they are. And in the McDaniel chapter, Mike McDaniel talks about the play against the 49ers to start that game. Remember when they started the game off with a 75-yard touchdown to Trent Sherfield? He said that he spent all week watching film and said, you know what? DeMeco Ryans keeps starting games with a pressure 5 look, and he's always sending the linebacker. If he vacates that side, we have this play every day. They practiced that play all week and told Tua, throw it blind on the glance route, and it'll score. That was the why. Like they want, the more that I read this book, they want an absolute robot at quarterback. They want a guy just to run their system, shut up, get in the meeting, don't butt heads with me, do what I tell you. And it's all of them. It's Kyle, it's Sean McVay, it's all of them. It's Mike McDaniel. Like it's like you read each chapter and I'm like, this guy sounds just like the last guy.
It's very directed. It's very directed in what you're supposed to do as a quarterback. And so some quarterbacks find that relieving because they get there, and some quarterbacks are talking about it even this year. Like they're with those style of coaches, and they're like, he tells me that this is going to be open and to go do this, and then it is, and I just do my job, and that's it. And some quarterbacks are like finding that very relieving, but I think some other quarterbacks can find that limiting. And this is where I think that you constantly have kind of a butting of heads with guys like Kurt Warner, who might not have functioned very well in an offense like this, because he wants more options. He wants more ability to affect the game with his read progressions. And I think that a guy with a limited physical ability like Tua probably needs that more than anything.
Yeah, and just look at Kyle Shanahan, the choices he's making at quarterback. Brock Purdy and now Mac Jones. Like he essentially, that's what he wants. He wants a yes man. Like he wants a yes man under center.
Well, and that they wanted Mac Jones in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Or Kyle Shanahan did in the first place, and then they got talked off of it into Trey Lance because they thought he was just this great physical prospect, and then they regretted it, and so I think that's very instructive.
Yeah. By the way, I thought it was poetic that last night the broadcast was talking about this. Joe Noteboom. He only played 10 snaps last night, but he was in place of Ronnie Stanley when Ronnie Stanley was out, and he wasn't particularly good or anything. But they were talking about Joe Noteboom as soon as that 4th and 1 play happened with Larry Borum. Guess who was available out there that could have been in place of Larry Borum? Joe Noteboom. In fact, why the hell is Kendall Lamb not the starter at right tackle already? Like it's just a disaster. But
he might be from here on, because we started off by talking about that Larry Borum the tripping penalty, and then and then later the Larry Borum and his reaction to remember the ominous words coming out of the Browns game where he said that if you are routinely affecting the team negatively, then we have to move on and assess somebody else. I think that was a signal. His reaction on that play was a signal that he is there with Larry Borum. So we'll see.
Yeah. Now let's talk about not team building, because we've already talked about that. We already beat it to death. But Chris Grier had to have, and look, ultimately, Stephen Ross is the one that's going to sign the check, and he's the one who's going to say, "You're the guy," to Brian Flores, and "You're the guy" to Mike McDaniel. But the general manager has to have some input, so he obviously had to have made a recommendation somewhere along the line, because there's no way that Chris Grier says, "Nah, you know what? You don't want Brian Flores," and then Stephen Ross says, "Okay, then Brian Flores is the new head coach." I don't think it works that way. I think it has to be the general manager, Chris Grier, has to have signed off on both of these coaches. What does it say that Chris Grier not only has a full-blown civil war with Brian Flores? Brian Flores sues the team. It costs you draft picks because you get investigated for tampering throughout the whole mess.
Yeah.
And you have a general manager and a head coach that are going behind each other's backs to make moves. Look, Cal Van Noy, you could believe him or not. By the way, he played very well last night. He was here. Cal Van Noy thinks that Chris Grier cut him to spite Brian Flores. And that's, it's obviously a rumor, but it's coming from Cal Van Noy's mouth. He's the player. He's saying that Chris Grier cut him to spite Brian Flores. I think as soon as Brian Flores got fired, and I think we said it on the pod, somebody had to have paid for that. Nobody did. And the guy who should have paid for it was Chris Grier. So let's speak to that, Simon. His choices at head coach, because they have to be attributed somehow to him, right? So your thoughts on that, on Chris Grier and his choices of head coaches?
Well, I mean, hindsight's a great thing, Al. Like, we can sit here and say, but you go back to the cycle up to the point where we hired Brian Flores, and you go back to the cycle where we hired Mike McDaniel, hottest defensive coordinator in the NFL, hottest offensive coordinator in the NFL, hottest offensive mind in the NFL, guy who everybody in the Patriots organization, the one that just won 12 Super Bowls back to back to back, pretty much, was saying that this guy is going to be, this guy is the guy. So, look, I think it's hard to go, oh yeah, we fucked up the head coaching thing, when we know, all of us, all three of us, were talking beforehand going, whoa, this Mike McDaniel guy, he looks pretty special, Yeah. Like, everybody's talking about how great he could be. And this Brian Flores guy is an absolute hard ass, and that's what we need right now. We need this guy who's going to come in, he's going to bring that Super Bowl ring and that winning mentality, and everything that he did in New England. Oh, plus he knows the Patriots, he knows Brady, he knows the scheme, he knows Josh McDaniel, he knows Belichick. We played them twice a year. This guy is the guy we need. So I think it's a bit, the horse has kind of bolted, and we're trying to shut the stable door when it comes to assessing his head coach choices. I think there's plenty you can grind the axe with over Chris Grier. I think his selection of head coaches is probably not one of them, albeit neither have succeeded. But it's not like he just took flyers on guys that everybody thought. It's not like he signed who's that guy that was Jeff Fisher, or it's not. I think he took chances on young up and comers that everybody was talking about, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think that if there's a mistake with the head coaches, well, first off, it's not even, don't even look at the half full or half empty yet, because like he hired coaches that can coach. We know that. Like, we know Brian Flores can coach defense. He can coach the hell out of defense, right? And we know that Mike McDaniel, despite some of the what I feel are weaknesses in the passing game as an offensive coordinator, the man can clearly coach offense, right? He came in here and immediate credibility. It's not like he got here and it's like, where's this genius offense that we're waiting for? Like, no, it shows its face a lot of the time. So, first things first, did you hire guys who can coach? Yeah, they can coach. The problem is, it's extraneous stuff, or stuff that looks extraneous during the hiring process that doesn't end up being extraneous. Brian Flores with an attitude problem and, with his kind of tendencies toward being a tyrant, possibly overlooked because, hey, we need that. We need, that's the sort of thing. Well, yeah, we need it until he turns that on you, and then Mike McDaniel, I happen to know that during the hiring process that he was hired despite everybody with full knowledge knowing that he is not the guy that is well organized. That he is the guy that will, just to take an example of like stuff that we're joking around about with Kyle Krabs, like, he will forget his parking pass more than he remembers it. He is, he's that kind of guy. He's not well organized. And though he is nuanced and detailed about different things that he's coaching on offense, I don't think that he's detailed in an all-encompassing way. And I think they knew that. And I think that they sort of hired him despite that. And it's sort of the weaknesses that you knew about coming back to bite you. And in many ways, with Chris Grier and his free agency choices and the way that he does his player choices, it's kind of like that. Like, we're aware of these problems, but we're going to dismiss them. And it's going to be, we're going to bet. And sometimes that comes up wrong. But I think you get back to it. Listen, when you hire Brian Flores, that's your pick. It's your guy, and then a civil war erupts that, makes going forward untenable. I don't care which side. You don't take sides on a civil war like that. You just dismiss them both.
Yes.
That's what you do. And it's both of your responsibilities to not end up in a situation like that. And you both failed. You both failed at your job to not end up in a situation like that. And
yeah, these are grown men. These are grown.
It takes two to tango.
Yeah, these are grown men, professionals, getting paid big wages, and they're in a full-blown tizzy in your building. Yes, you dismiss both of them.
You dismiss them both. And that if we're going to go back to, we talked a lot about Steve Ross as an owner. What are his weaknesses? What is that? And I think he's actually a well-meaning owner and a well-resourced owner and willing to commit those resources. And these are all positive things. And a lot of people are, they're like, oh, he's also an absentee owner. But also I think Simon brings up a great point. Like, this is supposed to be a bad thing for an owner to constantly have his, be noodling and what the team's doing and things like that. It's almost a cliche, the meddlesome owner across the NFL landscape. So, I mean, in many ways, I think he's a good owner, but one of his sins, when that happened, when those civil wars erupt, you get rid of them both. There's no right or wrong. There's no this guy's right, this guy's wrong, or this guy's right, this woman is wrong in the case of Donna Ponte. There's nothing like that. You just dismiss everything and start over. And that was probably a discrete sin that you could point to from Steve Ross.
Okay. Champ Kelly is now the interim general manager. I hope he's not going to do the thing that Simon, do you remember how Dick Cheney was chosen as the vice president for George W. Bush?
I don't, Alf, but you tell the story.
Okay. Dick Cheney was contacted by Jim Baker, okay, longtime Republican operative under Reagan, under the original Bush, statesman, real statesman, one of the greatest statesmen that this country's ever seen. And he hires, so it's like they had like two levels of hiring. He hires Dick Cheney to pick the vice president, right? And Dick Cheney does an exhaustive search, and he comes back to George W. Bush and he says, I think I know who could be the best the best vice president. You're looking at him.
That's Mike Tannenbaum in a nutshell, by the way. That's how Mike Tannenbaum got the job here in Miami.
Yeah. So let's talk about this going forward as we finish up here on this emergency pod. Simon, what should the next general manager, where are you looking for the next general manager? What should that person be? By the way, Chris sold me on the idea of an analytical person. Get as far away from the scouting world as you can. Hire good scouts below you to give you the information because the worst thing you could have is have 4 people. Like, look, we're all great friends, but if like we were let's say the committee to run the Miami Dolphins, we would probably be a disaster because we'd be arguing over players, and we'd be like, no, I want this guy. No, I don't know. And then Chris is gonna put his foot down, and we're like, okay, Chris is putting his foot down. He's like, it's unacceptable. We're gonna go with this player. And when you're always searching for consensus, that's how you fail. So I think it should be an analytical person, and just put good scouts below him or her, and just feed the information upward, and have this one person make these decisions. No more committees, please. Your thoughts, Simon?
If it's geek, we've got a geek head coach or a geek GM, geek with geek, nerds for the win. Alec Hallaby of Philadelphia is the kind of the nerd Chris, isn't he? I mean, that would be the kind of the nerd name. I think it's easy to say, look at the really great teams over the last 10, 15, 20 years in terms of drafting and free agency and how they run their teams. It's not just about picking players, it's how they run their teams. So you're looking at Baltimore, you're looking at New England, you're looking at Philadelphia, you're looking at Green Bay, you look at, Seattle, you're looking at Tampa Bay, all of those teams. So I think that brings in, people like Ray Agnew of Detroit, who Agnew, obviously a former player, but came up with Brad Holmes and Les Snead at the Rams, so as part of the Rams organization. So we'll have links to McDaniel through McVay and that tree there. Obviously now as the assistant GM in Detroit. And if there's a single team in the NFL that we as a three talk about on this podcast, about teams that just pick really good college players and in the draft, you look at Brian Branch and Hutchinson and Jameer Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell and all these great players, Jameson Williams, all these great players on this really fun team to watch, the team that essentially the Dolphins should be. Ragnew's been hugely involved in that. The best GM in the league, for my money, Harry Roseman, you could argue, but Jason Light and Tampa Bay. Jason Light's number 2 is Mike Greenberg. He's been there for a long time under Light. If Light is number 1 guy, why wouldn't you get the number 1 guys consigliere? That would make a lot of sense. You go to Seattle, you look at their drafting history. We talked about it in Discord a few weeks ago, and I listed all the players they drafted, middle round hits, future Hall of Famers, whether you look at Bobby Wagner or, all of those guys that they've had, Sherm and all of that. So Nolan Teasley out there in Seattle, Matt Berry in Seattle, Green Bay, historically, if you want to turn this offensive line around, Green Bay, they know how to draft offensive linemen. So then you're looking at Russ Ball, maybe, but John Eric Sullivan, certainly. Nick Mateo in Baltimore is hugely highly regarded. Ed Dodds in Indianapolis has been the number 2 to Chris, whatever his name is, for donkey's years. And then a couple of wild cards. Catherine Hickman at Cleveland is hugely highly regarded. And I'm not saying Cleveland historically had draft particularly well, but my understanding is that Hickman had more of an involvement in this year's draft. And actually, that's really, they drafted some good players. And then a couple of wild cards. Dawn Aponte is one. And people are like, and I tweeted about Dawn Aponte, and people are like, no, Dawn Aponte, she's terrible. She's this, she's that. I mean, I get that Dawn Aponte was here during that time. And I'm getting people going, well, what does she ever do? What did she ever do? Like, she wasn't a GM. She is extremely highly regarded, around the league. Her resume is massive. She is a big picture and macro thinker. She's worked across various departments for NFL teams, including, scouting, player personnel, finance, all of those things, including salary cap. Obviously, she's worked at the NFL. She understands how good organizations work. Whatever you think of the NFL, it's an extremely well-run organization. Apparently had a very good interview with the Chargers last November for their general manager job. Knows a lot more about personnel than I think that people think. So Dawn Aponte. And then the other name that I think you've probably just got to throw in there, Chris, is that of Nick Saban, because you can understand that Steve Ross will want to go big dog hunting at some point. And, whatever Miss Terry says, and however happy Nick Saban is working on, College Game Day and doing what he's doing, he also lives in Florida. West Palm Beach, is that right? Am I right in saying that? Somewhere like that?
Jupiter.
Haven't got to go far.
And we had this argument before, Simon. Remember, Alf and I going back and forth. I'm like, that's Miami, and he's like, that's not even close to Miami.
It might as well be Mars. It might as well be, another planet.
Might as well be Jupiter.
It's close enough, right? And I'm not saying he would be right, But I'm just saying that almost as a, not even a unifying force, but just somebody who has a bigger picture mindset mentality about what it takes to build a champion. I'm not saying that 73-year-old Nick Saban is going to be doing the do every day, is going to be at the Senior Bowl and all of those things. He's not. But as a head of football operations with a younger GM, you know, you could see a Nick Saban with an Alec Halaby and a Mike McDaniel as a kind of a, you know, if their intention is, as it seems, to keep McDaniel potentially this year and beyond it. Because I do think, Chris, there is a sense of, you can't just keep sacking coaches. Right. You give him Chris Grier 20 years. I'm not saying Mike McDaniel deserves 20 years, but you get nothing from just perpetually, you know, who wanted to sack Shane Steichen last year? Lots of people. Now the Indianapolis Colts are the number one team in the NFL at the moment. Like, at some point, the groceries have to be good enough for the cook to make the meal. And that's kind of my thought. I don't know what you think, Chris, about names, but they're the kind of that spring out to me.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into the specific names. We'll have plenty of time to do that. But you know, as far as job description goes, well, first off, the statement that came with this about Mike McDaniel being safe for the rest of the season and possibly beyond, to me says that, okay, we're doing this, you know, in the eyes of many people, the right way, which is to say that they're starting a GM search. That GM is going to make the decision on Mike McDaniel. That's what that statement means. Like, the reason that we're not firing Mike McDaniel before the season goes or is done is the same reason that they're not trading Jalen Phillips before the season is done. You know, they want the next guy to make that decision. And that is important in the executive world. That is a decision that your new executive is going to make. Okay, so you don't make it for him before he even starts, so everybody can, you know, calm your tits a little bit about, you know, Mike McDaniel is gonna keep going and he's a terrible. No, what they're doing is they're putting things in order. The order is they're going to hire this guy, and he's going to be part of that decision about whether Mike McDaniel stays on or whether Mike McDaniel is replaced and who replaces him. Okay, so that's the first thing. But what you're looking for, and I'll give you examples of what I'm talking about. You're looking for sort of an architect more than a scout. Like, you're looking at somebody who, you know, and financial managers, guys like that fit that. You're looking for an executive, somebody with executive skill sets. Executive skill sets involve building systems and then maintaining those systems underneath you. They involve having a vision, you know, having an effective vision, and a specific one, not just, you know, talk, but a specific vision for every aspect of the organization, and being able to evaluate all those little. You mentioned Don Aponte. And I'll give you an example, because Don Aponte famously had a beef with Jeff Ireland. Right? Those two were not, you know, good on each other. Well, guess what? Jeff Ireland was bad at his job. So I mean, you know, so you can't really blame Don Aponte for that. She came to the correct conclusion that Jeff Ireland was bad at his job. So that beef was understandable. She turned on him. She was also known, and this is where I caution people about Don Aponte and what you think of her. This is a period in sports history, and I want to be careful here because this is not about politics or anything like that, but this is a period of sports history that we knew about her where misogyny was pretty rampant in the way things were presented to us, in the way that certain sports writers presented things to us. What you knew about Don Aponte, like a lot of the things that people remember about Don Aponte, was the weird relationship between her and Joe Philbin, you know, like, and with all of the, you know, that by the way, that's your music, Simon. That's the music we were searching for on the announcement of Chris Grier being fired. That music right there. But so Don Aponte was trying to help Joe Philbin be a better head coach. She was, you know, very close with him, trying to coach him on his press conferences. And people were like, the way sports writers, you know, wrote that up and positioned that was this weird relationship between female Don Aponte and married Joe Philbin. And, you know, like obvious, like as in, oh, no, that can't possibly be just a normal, you know, business relationship or partnership in any way. There has to be something weird about that. And, that's sort of this latent misogyny that crept into the sports reporting at the time. So you may not even realize that your opinion of Aponte is probably colored by that, from what was going on 10 plus years ago that way. But the bottom line is she also turned on Joe Philbin, right? After helping him, trying to, working closely with him, trying to make him a better head coach, doing what she needed to do that way. She also came to the conclusion that this guy can't coach. And you know what? This guy can't coach.
Yeah.
And so she tried to get him out. Right. So she is an axe man. Okay. And this is part of what you need in a general manager. You need an axe man or woman, like
axe woman.
Yeah. Somebody who is willing to cut the pieces that are not performing well. There's too much buddy. And, so-and-so has a family and, he's going to be here for 20 years and stuff like that. Like, I think there's probably a little bit too much of that. You need, and that's part of executive skill set when I keep mentioning that. You also need the financial skill set. This is why Philadelphia looks at guys from the finance world, literally investment professionals, that they hire them all throughout that front office under Howie Roseman. These are guys that can manage a portfolio of assets, and there's all kinds of aspects of doing that are like that go well beyond scouting and being able to tell whether this guy's a good player or not. So you need somebody like that. And what are they doing that's so innovative? And other teams as well, is they have a vision for how the salary cap interacts with NFL football management. And how much, I keep referring to it, the salary cap, as a debt model, because it is a debt model, but it's a debt system where there is no interest rate, but there is an inflation rate, which is to say that in our world, and because I am a portfolio manager in finance in real life, in our world, then you would have infinite debt if there's no interest rate cost to your debt. But there is an inflation rate, a pretty high inflation rate, then you would just take on monstrous amounts of debt. Well, some NFL teams are starting to figure that out, and they're starting to test the boundaries of what kind of debt they can take against their future and what is realistic. And I think that that's part of the vision that you need in the CEO of the management of the company, of the Miami Dolphins, needing to be able to have a real concept of that and how much is too far, but also how much we need to do in order to push it. But then I think that they also need to, I would look for guys, we talk about nerds and stuff like that. That's not necessarily the only place I would look. I would look for people with coaching backgrounds too, because coaches have a real, where the rubber meets the road, feel for what is absolutely necessary and what is definitely not going to work. And I think that sometimes the scouts can forget that. I think that sometimes that the, from that perspective, they don't have enough experience or wherewithal to be able to say, no, I absolutely cannot steer into that territory. So guys with coaching backgrounds are very attractive there. And so, you're looking for the person that can put all of this together: executive leadership, vision, the ability to be an axe man or an axe woman and cut non-performing pieces out and evaluate everybody. Here's the one thing that I don't necessarily need. I don't necessarily need another scout to be, as you alluded to, a redundant layer over the many layers of scouting that you already have in the organization. You already have an area scout, you have you have a guy above him, you have assistant directors, and then the assistant general manager and the general manager, all these layers of somebody's going to take and have eyeballs on a player's film. And but whose eyeballs matter?
And each regional scout has 3 assistants.
Yeah.
So this is part of the pushback that, like,
you essentially have Congress inside the Dolphins building.
This is part of the pushback. I tweeted about Dawn Aponte 20 minutes ago, and 2 of the things that, Chris, that you've touched upon in the last couple of minutes, one, are showing up massively in the replies, because 95% of people are like, keep Dawn Aponte away. It's just a load of misogynistic ranting from, we don't need a woman running our team, to she doesn't know anything. Lots of people who just have no idea what the actual story was, and the fact that she didn't think Jeff Ireland was very good at his job, and then she didn't think Joe Philbin was very good at a job, and she essentially just spoke truth to power, and people didn't want to hear it. And people just don't get that, don't see that, don't believe that, don't understand that. And then the other thing is she doesn't know anything about personnel. She doesn't know anything about talent evaluation. Well, two things. She knows an awful lot about talent evaluation, but also she doesn't need to be down in the absolute weeds because that's why you hire good people. Like the best businesses, like Stephen Ross hires really good people in his construction and all of those things to do the. Stephen Ross he's not there looking at the size of nails and which JCB to hire.
He's not. Yeah, he hires a purchase agent to buy his drywall, to buy his masonry,
and then make good informed decisions about all the information that's on the table. She's not a bullshitter. She's a clear thinker. You don't get to do the job that she does, in the NFL, at the NFL, without being exactly what she is. Like the idea that we just need some absolute grunt who's going to be in his car 226 days of the year, going around looking at kids from Western Hackensack University is just fucking nonsense. You need somebody who's a clear thinker, an analytical thinker, can just say, I agree with this, bring me all this information. Right, we've got all this information. We're going to go here, 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 and here. We're going to do this, 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 and this. We're not going to give this guy a contract. We are going to give it. It's like, it's, I don't know. It's fan replies, but it's just nonsense.
And I'm not trying to like make this like, oh, Donna Ponte needs to be our next GM. But the things that I remember from her, and I admit, like, I was right there, kind of without thinking about it too deeply, kind of like Donna Ponte. No, that's just, no, it's not going to work. But I try to remember the things that I do remember about her time in Miami is one. There was the Hard Knocks thing, and there's that conversation on the conference call on the phone with her, talking about Ryan Tannehill, and Tannehill was his agent were holding out, and it was over a specific clause. It was about offsets. It was about a contract offsets, which have become the standard, universal 100.0% standard of all NFL contracts. And she was at the leading edge of that. And she was like, no, we're not accepting a contract without offsets. And I'm like, and of course, all us fans were thinking about, she's saying, at this rate, then Ryan Tannehill's going to re-enter the draft, and we're just going to have to, stuff like that. And we're looking, of course, we're fans. We're like, oh, what an evil woman, it's over some stupid contract clause, stuff like that. Okay, well, look at that. That was her doing her job. She had a huge beef with Jeff Ireland. Okay, that was her doing her job and saying this guy is bullshit. She got really close with Joe Philbin and did everything, even trying to coach him on press conferences, on how to handle his press conferences to try to make him a good coach. That's doing your job. That's doing your job. And then when she decided that Joe Philbin wasn't worth shit, she turned on him too. That's doing your job. So I mean, you have to look beyond the bullshit into what people are doing and whether they do their job well. But it's everything that Simon just said. You don't necessarily need that redundant layer of scouting. What you do need is somebody who will put a system in place and maintain it properly, and somebody who has principles, somebody who has the right principles, but principles that your franchise will be guided by in everything they do. And I don't think Miami has had that for quite some time. I think that, probably not since the Parcells time here. And before that, the Saban time, So I think that they need that probably above all. And hopefully they're the right principles.
Last thing as we get out of here, because we've gone a little long, but it's been worth it. And it's been a great show. I think we've provided a lot of insight on this. Last thing, it's been my suspicion, and I've talked about it all year on OnlyFans. And again, just look at the little link that I'm going to put on this show, and right there under my name, you could join there for $4.99 a month, all access. Do it on a desktop. It's been my suspicion that Stephen Ross has been indoctrinated into the Shanahan cult, and once you get indoctrinated to the Shanahan cult, you never leave. Okay, so I've thought about this. Who are the Shanahan disciples that have been fired? I think it's like a handful. Slowick, I guess. He's here, by the way. So let's say that Stephen Ross is in the cult, and once you're in, you don't get out. So we're like, no. This has to work. This has to work because reasons. Okay, this has to work. Mike McDaniel's my guy. It has to work. It might not be such a bad thing that you get somebody that's in perfect lockstep with your coach, because then when the team sucks, you fire everybody, and you know, okay, all these guys, these people are just bad at their job, right? On the way out, give some, because I don't have any. Give some people names that fit the Shanahan cult at general manager Simon.
General manager.
I mean, thanks for throwing that on.
Obviously, it has to be people that have branched out from Kyle.
I mean, I don't have an answer to that off the top of my head, mate.
Lynch is anybody who's branched off of Lynch.
Champ Kelly himself is reputed to be one of those Shanahan cult guys. So, I mean,
Tariq Ahmad, Parik Marathe in San Francisco. Who else is at the Rams? Who's Les Snead's number 2? Is it Kevin Demo? Oh no, he's the president, isn't he? Who's the deputy vice? Who's the deputy GM? John McKay. McKay's been around the block. Ray Farmer. I assume John McKay is the son of
Rich McKay.
Rich McKay, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
who has to this day the greatest line any coach has ever uttered. Do you know which one that is, Simon?
no.
He was asked by the media at a press conference, "What did you think of your team's execution?" He says, "I'm all for it."
Don't forget that Kyle Shanahan was offensive coordinator at the Falcons when Rich McKay was the GM. So there's obviously a link. McKay would be
and that's a gravitas type of name, right?
Yeah, John McKay would be 10 years with the Rams. First year, although it's first year as assistant general manager, but he was director of pro personnel for many years there. So
yeah, like that's kind of a big name. Like if you want your whale and you want it to fit in the cult, it's not crazy.
That's the sort of guy that you pair though with a Saban. That's not a guy that having 1 year's experience as assistant GM that you suddenly parlay into a GM-ship of an absolute clusterfuck that we've got.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
I mean, I disagree with the premise. I don't think Steve Ross is indoctrinated into the Shanahan cult at all. I think, if anything, he's in the Harbaugh cult. I think that's, if you go all the way back to his flirtation with Harbaugh with the Miami Dolphins when Tony Sparano was still here and Stephen Ross had freshly taken ownership of the Dolphins. And then, the fact that Steve Ross is essentially the main benefactor of the Michigan football program. And so Jim Harbaugh was his coach for a long time up there in Michigan. And now Harbaugh left Michigan. But, I think that if John Harbaugh shakes loose out of Baltimore, then there's your executive with coaching experience who's going to be, I think the next head coach, could be that guy that has that pulls all the strings, or it could be the general manager. And it's all about who it is. If it's Nick Saban, then it's probably not the head coach. I'm just going to say probably, because Nick Saban, I think he sounds very earnest when he says that, the coaching was going to kill him. And, there's only one way he knows how to do it, and that's the primary reason he says he's not going back to college coaching. Is he only knows one way to be the head coach of a team and one way to work, and it was literally killing him, and he's not up for that. And so I think that it could be a general manager thing, but Nick Saban is one of those guys. He's a very executive type of guy, and he will have a vision. He will 1000% have a vision of how everything works, and he will fit everything underneath it into that vision. So I think you're looking for big personalities like that. You're looking for big guys who have the gravitas, whether it be head coach or whether it be the general manager, to really set up entire systems into place and be an executive. And I think that whoever is they settle on this way, it's obvious that Jennifer Ross is going to be part of that. It's obvious that Kim Ross and her husband Daniel Silman are going to be part of that discussion and part of that evaluation, because we all know how old Steve Ross is. He's not hiring the next person for himself. He's probably hiring the next person for his successors. You know, that is probably in his mindset. And that might have been why he wasn't ready to do it last offseason. You know, and so I think that is something that we'll have to consider. But I don't think it has to be a Shanahan guy. I don't think that he's indoctrinated in anything. I think if any cult that he's part of, it's probably the Harbaugh cult.
What do you think the timeline will be, Chris?
This general manager, I mean, they're probably going to figure this out by January or something like that. Now, I don't know exact. I'm not speaking from great information here. It's just, you know, to hit the ground running, I think that you need to have this wrapped up probably by January, and then that's when, at the end of the season comes, then the decision will have been made on Mike McDaniel and whether, you know, Mike McDaniel is the next guy, or whether Mike McDaniel is going to be replaced by somebody that the new general manager likes.
All right. And we're going to leave it there. On Monday, we'll talk very briefly about this game, but we're going to talk mostly trade deadline, of which Champ Kelly will be in charge of. So we'll talk about who should go, who should stay, who is part of the solution, who is the problem, who should go. Maybe just, you know, a good bloodletting sometimes works. Just cutting players sometimes works. And maybe that's something that will be in the cards. But we'll talk about it all on Monday. But till then.
Cheers, guys.